Hi, Andrew. Curiosity killed the cat, but what sphinx of cement and aluminum broke open its skull and ate up its imagination? This post is largely inspired by a blog post called Meditations on Moloch from the Star Slate Codex blog that Scott Alexander writes. This blog post contains part of Allen Ginsberg's poem called How, the Best Minds of My Generation poem. You might have heard that line. So links will be in the description. Um, so let's start with game theory basics. The definition of a game is not so different from the circumstances in a tabletop RPG in which you'd have to make a roll. It's a situation in which the outcome is dependent on the action of two or more players. Players are assumed rational decision makers like people or orcs or deep mind. Players employ strategies in the game in order to receive a payoff. So the classic example of a game is called the Prisoner's Dilemma, which you've probably heard of, but I'll restate the classic formulation from Wikipedia just to be formal about it. So two members of a criminal gang are arrested and imprisoned. Each prisoner is in solitary confinement with no means of communicating with the other. The prosecutors lack sufficient evidence to convict the pair on the principal charge. They hope to get both sentenced to a year in prison on a lesser charge. Simultaneously, the prosecutors offer each prisoner a bargain. Each prisoner is given the opportunity to either betray the other by testifying that the other committed the crime, or to cooperate with the other by remaining silent. The offer is, if Alice and Bob each betray the other, each of them serves 2 years in prison. If Alice betrays Bob, but Bob remains silent, cooperates, then Alice will be set free and Bob will serve 3 years in prison, and vice versa. If Alice and Bob both remain silent, both of them will only serve 1 year in prison on the lesser charge. So imagine you are Alice and you don't care about Bob or trust him at all. Then regardless of what Bob does, you will do better by defecting and ratting Bob out. So whether Bob agrees to cooperate or to defect, in either circumstance, you will do better by, you will personally do better by defecting. So as a rational agent, you will decide to defect. A rational agent who's only concerned with the immediate results of this game. So imagine, on the other hand, that you and Bob have some reason to trust each other. Say, for example, you have a gang boss who you both know will kill the family of anyone who defects. So you can definitely trust Bob not to defect, right? And vice versa. So gang members as a whole will serve the least total jail time if this game is iterated. 1 year each for a total of 2 years. From the outside view, for someone who cared about both Alice and Bob, this would be the best outcome, right? So without an outside enforcer, how can two players in this game ever reach the optimal strategy of mutual cooperation? So if we look at this game being iterated, multiple prisoners' dilemmas in sequence, then a solution emerges that's called tit for tat. So an agent employing the tit for tat strategy will cooperate with anyone who cooperates with them, and will initiate the first round of the game by extending an olive branch and cooperating first with new players. This strategy will lead to 100% cooperation if every agent is using the tit for tat strategy. Everyone will cooperate in the first round, and then because the other person cooperated, they will continue to cooperate and lead to only good outcomes. However, this can lead to death spirals of defection followed by defection if one player is using tit for tat but the other defects. Then they will punish by defecting, the other person will punish by defecting, and so on and so forth. So in some cases, there's a slightly better strategy called tit for tat with forgiveness, like the regular strategy, but you need 2 defections in a row in order to defect. So this prevents the death spiral from happening, but will allow less scrupulous agents to take more advantage of you. So depending on the environment you're in, who you're playing against, that might be a better or worse strategy. But these sorts of strategies that I'm talking about require more long-term thinking than just trying to punish the person who can punish you, or strike first before you can be struck. So what does this have to do with Moloch? Moloch is the answer to the question asked at the beginning of the video. What sphinx of cement and aluminum bashed open their skulls and ate up their brains and imaginations? Moloch is what happens in a game when there's no outside enforcer and no nice strategy like tit for tat. It's a personification of what happens when people act purely in their own rational self-interest with no empathy or long-term thinking, or outside enforcer. No bonds of trust between players. Moloch exemplifies bad Nash equilibriums, or points where rational agents are all acting in their own self-interest and would have to act against their interest in the short term in order to arrive at a strategy that was better for their long-term interest. You can imagine Nash equilibriums to be local maximums on a graph that are not global maximums. Agents would have to move down in order to move to a higher state. Real-life examples include situations like the Cold War, where each side continued to stockpile weapons in order to keep up with the other side. At any time, the arms race could have ended with an outside enforcer to place a cap on weapons stockpiling, but at any given time, each side was acting rationally when it increased its weapon stores out of fear of the other side doing the same thing. Being trapped at bad Nash equilibria is often called a coordination problem, because if the agents could coordinate better, they would not have a problem. So, another example is like two roommates or cohabitating partners who are attempting to share a kitchen, like Alice and Bob again. Alice and Bob both want to cook, but neither wants to do dishes. So Alice cooks first, leaves the dishes in the sink. She gets what she wants. She cooks and she doesn't clean. No long-term thinking, but her short-term desires are satisfied. But this is kind of like a defection in the who does dishes game. So Bob does the same thing. He defects back. And eventually the dishes pile so high that there are no more dishes to cook with, so Alice is forced to clean just enough dishes to cook with, and then leaves them in the sink afterward. And Bob does the same thing. This is a Nash equilibrium in which everyone does the minimum of cleaning they must do in order to cook. Unfortunately, it means the sink stays full of gross dishes. If Alice and Bob could solve this coordination problem, they could do the exact same amount of cleaning, but have an empty sink and a nicer kitchen. All they'd have to do is cooperate rather than defect from the beginning. That is, clean the dishes they use to cook with after they're done cooking. There are a number of other solutions that come to mind as well. Better Nash equilibria. They agree that, Bob does all the dishes, and Alice does all the laundry, for example. But no one is forced to clean by the need to cook until the dishes pile high enough. So a lot of people end up trapped in the local maximum of a sink full of dishes. And furthermore, lots of forces conspire to trap them in the worst equilibrium. Maybe one day Alice is in a rush and she doesn't have time to clean, so Bob sees the dirty dishes and interprets this as a defection. And his strict tit-for-tat strategy means he leaves the dishes next time to punish her. And so a death spiral of defection happens. All they'd have to do to fix it would be to talk to each other and think of a better strategy and imagine something a bit further than the next 10 minutes of their lives spent doing dishes. Like some sphinx of cement and aluminum bashed open their skulls and ate up their brains and imagination. So these failures to coordinate, think, and imagine are everywhere. Capitalism produces these situations everywhere, from unemployed people who would love to have a job and be productive, but can't afford the transit to get them there, to the process where we give all our money to the company that's best at producing the product we want, until they drive everyone else out of business and form a monopoly and then can safely lower quality and raise prices. Of course, in some places we've come up with solutions like subsidized housing and antitrust laws, which act kind of like outside enforcers to address problems like this. It's not that we can't fight Moloch, it's that it's not easy. As a communications professional, this type of problem is really near and dear to my heart, so I thought you should understand it a little better. So go read the Moloch poem too. It's really good. I'll talk to you later.